As a group of people chose a topic about how the principles of social justice and advocacy support the culturally safe healthcare. In the following presentation, our objectives are defining the cultural safe healthcare, how the principles of social justice support the cultural safe care in Aboriginals, how the advocacy become the voice for women in Canada. Along with this, we are going to focus on how Code of Ethics becomes the main foundation of culturally safe care here in Canada. Starting out this presentation with a pregnant Muslim woman who enters into a delivery room and tells the nurse that she only wants women nurses and doctors in the delivery room to provide her with safe care. Why are we talking about this? You might be wondering why we're talking about this. Well, we're talking about this because according to Stat Canada, the immigration population in Canada could increase from 20% in 2006 to 28% by 2031. And all of these Canadians and foreigners need a culturally safe healthcare system. Culturally safe care can be defined as a knowledge of inequalities should be made aware to the working professionals so they can provide care according to the individual needs. We're going to define it and look at it with the perspective of Aboriginal people of Canada. The term cultural safe healthcare first came in New Zealand, where the nurses provided cultural safe healthcare to the Aboriginal people of New Zealand and seeing how they can implement more safe health practice to the Aboriginal people of New Zealand. So we see that example in relation to the Aboriginal people here in Canada as they have gone into colonization and residential schools in which they lost their language, their identity, and their culture. We see that because of colonization, which resulted in establishment of residential schools, the First Nations of Canada faced a huge identity crisis. With the loss of their identity, they lost their hunting and fishing rights, being dependent on the colonizers for food and shelter, and many generations now facing high rate of diabetes and poverty. 1 out of 5 families of Aboriginal people of Canada live below the poverty line. First Nations of Canada not only face poverty, but they also face a high level of stereotyping and racism in their healthcare system. This becomes one of the stumbling blocks for many Aboriginal people to come to hospitals for healthcare. Cultural safe care provides the Aboriginal people to go into the healthcare system and ask for help. Social determinants in healthcare system for Aboriginal people affected their health in the matter of low educational system. They won't be able to be educated in a proper manner because of low income and getting low quality of food. Therefore, they couldn't achieve proper health being. Furthermore, we see that 1 out of 5 Aboriginal families end up having a low healthcare system because of the high poverty rates. We see the Aboriginal people suffering through this even after the colonization and residential schools. Because of this negative effect, they are considered to be the first people getting the second-hand healthcare. So we're going to indicate this in a video with a 53-year-old woman who was given a second healthcare.
Michelle Lebrac was recently found to have a fractured pelvis, but it took 3 trips to hospital before she received that diagnosis.
You're not treated as well as like the white people that come in, and a native or just seem to be turned away.
Not her first bad hospital experience. Once, she went to see a doctor about stomach pain. They discussed her drinking problem and homelessness. He gave her this. When she complained, the hospital apologized, but she felt humiliated.
It's discriminating against natives, I'm pretty sure.
Discrimination against Aboriginal people is in fact pervasive in the healthcare system, according to this new study, which says ongoing racism has had a major impact on Aboriginal people's health.
By looking at the culturally safe healthcare which was not properly provided to the First Nations people of Canada, we see that the Canadian Code of Ethics provided a guideline for nurses to give justice to both the patients and the healthcare providers. The 7th rule of Code of Ethics becomes the foundation of cultural healthcare practice in promotion of justice for the First Nations, and it is based on the 3 principles of social justice, which provides human rights, equity, and fairness. Equity supports genders and discrimination, spiritual beliefs, and physical abilities and social economic status. Social justice is equitable distribution, and the basic foundation of social justice comes out to be equity. Equity is distributing in a fairness manner without looking at any factors mentioned in the Code of Ethics.
Social justice has 4 basic principles, which are equity, access, participation, and rights. Out of These 4 principles, equity plays a major role in Aboriginal people. We provide them with basic healthcare system according to social determinants of health, making it easily accessible for them, and respecting their rights of First Nations. The other point that is important to keep in mind is acknowledging the fact that the First Nations of Canada have gone through a lot and thus deserve that empathy and sympathy in the healthcare. The same knowledge is applicable with the example of Muslim women that was stated earlier in the presentation.
Now moving on to the presentation, we come to the concepts of social advocacy part, where advocacy is the main point. The advocacy can be summed up in the 3 basic words: stand, speak, and act. Social advocacy is voicing out an opinion for the patients. Not only the nurses become the healthcare advocates for the patients, but there is also other organizations that advocates for the patients, which is the DAWN, which stands for Disabled Women Organization. This organization advocates and voices out opinions for the women in Canada. But not only has it become the voice of women in good health, but also women with disabilities. Summarizing the whole presentation, we can compare the cultural healthcare to a tree, with code of ethics being the roots, and the trunk is like the foundations of social justice and advocacy, that is equity. The branches of the tree can be symbolized to save competent care, dignity, respect, stewardship, honor, safety, empathy, and confidentiality. And all these components of tree, from the roots to branches, nourish the leaves, who are the Aboriginal people and Multicultural Society of Canada. Out of this presentation, what we conclude as a group is that cultural healthcare system started with the Aboriginal people in Canada, but it is now extending to different communities because of how Canada is widely multicultural. It is increasing and becoming a major impact in the healthcare system, therefore leading Canada having one of the best healthcare systems all over the world.